Are you going to do it? Sweet. Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the final chapter of the Hidden Bridge series, a conversation that's already creating waves across the veteran community. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and today we're pulling all the threads together to expose not just the problems, but more importantly, the solutions. If you've been with us through parts 1 and 2, you've heard Thomas McKenzie's powerful journey and how our recruitment system shapes military identity from day one. We've uncovered how assumptions made in 1973 still echo through the every aspect of military service today. Now, in this final installment, we're going to do what the military trained us to do. We're going to attempt to solve the problem. We're going to tackle the leadership features head on as they lay out a blueprint for real systemic change. With me again are Thomas McKenzie and Matt Lasher, two Marines who've seen the challenges from every angle, from recruitment to transition, from ground level to strategic planning. So today, we're not just identifying what's broken, we're mapping out how to fix it. As we work toward our mission of reaching 1 million veterans before May 9th, 2025, this episode could be the catalyst that finally bridges the gap between identifying problems and implementing solutions. So before we dive in, if what you hear today resonates with you, share it. The only way we create real change is by getting these solutions in front of the people who can implement them. Thomas, Matt, let's start with the elephant in the room. Where's leadership falling short?
Matt, I'll jump on this one to start, and it's not even necessarily that they're falling short out of intention. It's just really they don't know what they don't know, and too many times when we start talking about this problem of transition or what it's like for somebody to leave a unit, they're just kind of operating off of the mission sets that they know and the known requirements that they have, and so I can kind of give an example for the group here. Just on what my personal experience was before I had gone through my own individual transition. So I was the recruiting instructor for recruiting station San Francisco for the Marine Corps. And look, I find myself in a position where I am the senior enlisted advisor on all technical recruiting matters to that individual commander. And we're sitting in a room talking about personnel. And there was one individual Marine who had failed to get promoted from Sergeant E5 to Staff Sergeant E6 two previous times. The Marine was a pretty decent Marine. He was a great recruiter, wrote a ton of contracts for me, and he was probably one of my favorite guys that we had out there because he could just continually produce over and over and over again. And so we find ourselves in this room where we're talking about personnel, and the news breaks that the Marine had failed to get selected for promotion to E6 for a third subsequent time. And the Marine Corps really kind of has those rules of, you're promoted by, the 3 strikes, you're out situation. And in fact, it might have even been 2 strikes, you're out. And he was just on his third. But knowing that this guy has no career left in the Marine Corps, my mind is not necessarily on what do we do to take care of this human being. It comes down to what type of production am I going to be able to get out of this guy, and how am I going to sustain my mission, because I know that I'm not going to get a replacement for him since it wasn't necessarily projected out. So he's about 180 days away from being out of uniform. It might have been closer to about 7-8 months. And so the conversation comes up of what are we going to do to make sure that we maintain production, and how quick can we get a replacement for this guy? And so the Marine just wanted a little bit of time. I mean, it's a heartbreaking thing to think about your entire career, this club that you've been part of, this family you've been part of, now saying that you are no longer allowed to stick around for whatever reason. And in this case, it had been his performance in his primary job. But that's, he's heartbroken by that. He's got 5 freaking kids. He's living in one of the most affluent areas that you can live in the Bay Area. And, my initial thoughts are, what am I going to be able to do to keep this kid motivated to keep writing contracts and inspiring the Marine Corps? So, develop this plan that, based on the number of contracts that this kid can write between now and what the end of his tour would be. If he hits that number and he does it a little bit sooner, we're going to give him a little bit more time as a reward. And what do we end up doing? I end up taking away his ability to, get 90 full days of terminal leave and maybe a little bit more time to take care of all the personal matters that he needs to take care of. And I tell him, hey, once you write X amount of contracts, we'll let you go. But if you don't write X amount of contracts, you're only going to be afforded this much time. And so I say that, and for people that are on the other end of the transition, it's kind of like looking at me like you're shocked. Like, why would you ever do that? But in my mind back then, that was the right thing to do because it was the right thing for the organization. It was the right thing for the unit. It was the right thing for my commander at the time because it needed to happen. And when I think about it, 5 kids in the Bay Area, you think that you're going to have a career beyond that duty. Now that no longer exists. And then the return to that service member is, hey, you don't get any more time. Good luck. Figure it out. Not my problem. Write the contracts. If you don't want to write the contracts, tough. You're just going to sit here and be miserable. And I didn't think about the impact that was going to have on me, overall. Because now this guy who's been trained and equipped to help recruit and help the mission, I've just kind of gone and set him back. I've made it harder for him to discover himself. I've made it harder for him to understand this corporate construct that he's trying to, break into. I've made it harder for him to really deal with the process and kind of emotionally decompress from what it's like to be a Marine. And again, at the time, I had zero regard whatsoever for anything other than the mission. And the reality is that there are so many folks that are in senior leadership, positions that have that narrow view that are making the same types of calls to their commanders. And commanders who care about one thing and one thing only, which is readiness and mission accomplishment, allowing those decisions to take place. So in short, from kind of my story there, Adam, look, that's what this is about. It's about telling the truths, the things that we've learned afterwards, and helping, the general public and those that are in influential positions to understand the stories that are really killing the services while they're in terms of retention and then recruitment on the front end. But more importantly, killing the people that have selflessly sacrificed for years and killing their ability to kind of find themselves and thrive post-service. I think it just comes down to the education of all and veteran advocates standing up and actually telling the truth and being real with the situation.
Case in point with your vulnerability to say that you were part of the problem, to out that to this live format and correct yourself. I think, obviously that's the mark of a good leader, admitting when you're wrong and then sharing that lesson with others so that they can learn from it too. I appreciate that story, Thomas, and it speaks volumes. It's still happening to this day. I had a conversation a few weeks ago with a Marine in a SkillBridge presentation who says his leadership in the Marine Corps is actively hamstringing access to SkillBridge programs still to this day. Back to the mission readiness thing. Matt, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a tendency, I'm a little further from the longer in the tooth in terms of my time as a veteran versus service member. And I can tell you that the country really needs a thriving veteran population, not just a not homeless situation or not someone who isn't we really need people to be successful. We need to rise in the ranks of government, rise in the ranks of business. And that's a national security issue in my eyes. And so having these important people with these important perspectives at critical parts of our system is important for our future success. And if we can't enable that through service, there's got to be a way to fix it. And that problem, unfortunately, it stretches back to recruiting. And we've all talked about in previous chats that recruiting is an issue. Well, it's coupled. The veteran issue and the recruiting issue is linked. As information becomes more readily available for people through social media, through YouTube, through the internet, we're not relying on ads and recruiters to tell us a story about services. We're relying on people we trust in our communities who have already had those experiences to direct us down our paths. And if the experiences are always bad, you're going to not have people wanting to do these, to follow us in the footsteps here. Oops, I lost you here. Let me see here. Let me go back here.
We just adapt and overcome. It's just your camera. You can keep talking.
Yeah. So that's the connection I draw to it. And I think leadership has for a very long time been able to have sort of a one-track mind in the military, and that is combat readiness, mission accomplishment, the focus on this very narrow scope of their responsibilities within their service. And that is, I think, a pretty dramatic mistake. And I think institutions need to put more responsibility on subordinate commanders to take responsibility for the outcomes of individual services and service members, and maybe even divorce that responsibility from the DoD and maybe put that responsibility on the Veterans Affairs before separation, to prevent those conflicts of interest, we'll call them, from interfering with a veteran's success and transition. It's really something, a mechanic of our institutions that needs to get kind of adjusted and fixed, or we're going to continue to see this pool of talent that we draw from as our services shrink and shrink and shrink, because it's just like almost like a self-leaking ice cream cone of failure, right? We just keep creating bad experiences. Those bad experiences keep informing other people's choices, and we keep going down this road of kind of destruction. And veterans or service members have a tendency to want to categorize. Everybody does this. Is something good or bad? And I think a lot of commanders and leaders in the service will say, is SkillBridge good? Is it bad? And they'll have an opinion. Like, it's not good because we need the people. It's not good because it's not helping them enough, or it's not doing this, or it's not doing that. And I would challenge that thought process. And I would say that really how you should look at it is, if you can have a veteran 3%, 5% more capable as a civilian through a better transition process, then that's a worthy endeavor, because that 5% might be the all they needed to really start their internal fire and move them in the right direction, or get them landed in the right place, or get them in the right hemisphere of job opportunities. Yeah. So I guess that's my perspective. I think it's the services need to change the paradigm in which they view all of this. And it's not just a manpower issue. It's not just a internal uniformed issue. It's a recruit and veteran problem coupled with, a leadership challenge.
Yeah, Thomas, let's move into why SkillBridge is important, why leadership should stop hamstringing these men and women from going through this stuff, particularly as somebody who has, I didn't have an opportunity for SkillBridge, whether it existed or not when I got out, or it just wasn't presented as an opportunity to me. I immediately saw the benefit when you and I were introduced, when you first reached out to me, of having 12 different tracks that, giving you access to Coursera, preparing you, even just as little as getting this project management certificate, for free, right, through the SkillBridge program, and how you can leverage that on the other side. So, Matt just did speak to, you can talk to people who've been through SkillBridge, talk to leadership, and you'll get different opinions. I want to make the argument for why it's so important. And I think you're probably the best person to do that.
Well, so let me take one step back. I don't necessarily know that the Marine Corps is hamstringing service members, from taking the opportunity. But I do know that they've put some limitations on that, and I think that's centered around just force readiness in general. And so they've really kind of come up with a 90-day max situation, and a lot of it is tied to the rank that a Marine achieves, right? And so the higher the rank, the less time that you get. The lower the rank, the more time. Which, hey, you can make the argument, however you want to make it, but the reality is that I would argue that service members that have been in longer probably need more time to decompress and find themselves and realize where they want to go. There's also been some limitations, and I'd say that this is more DoD-wide, on the ability to get into remote-based training programs that were there. And that, again, is coming from probably the DoD level or higher, in terms of the office that oversees that program. And again, there's some cause and effect that's probably not realized at this point. So let's talk a little bit about what SkillBridge is. Right now, kind of under the current construct, there are about two different pathways that you can walk as it stands today. So you can search an intern to hire type SkillBridge, where you go apply for a job, go to that job every single day and learn the skills that are there. And then hopefully at the conclusion of that SkillBridge, you end up employed with that company. And that's really the general premise of why the program was developed. The other one is more focused on employment skills training and giving folks the opportunity to earn civilian certifications that align with the workforce that will put them into a better position once it comes time for them to find a job and find out what they want to do next. In my opinion, there's value in both. There's value in both because there needs to be a wide array of options that are available for service members, so that they can kind of pick the pathway that makes the most sense for them. and put themselves in the best position to possibly win. The reality is, Adam, is that here are some problems kind of with SkillBridge and the direction that it's going, is that in a lot of cases, these jobs, these SkillBridges that people are applying for have to align directly to the skill sets that they currently have or ones that they could quickly grow into. And so if you're looking to kind of break into a completely different world that you don't have the experience in, you're not necessarily a top-notch candidate. On top of that, timeframes have to align. So those internships are only offered at certain points in time. And if your transition doesn't align perfectly with what a command will allow, or what aligns with your transition timeline, you're not going to be qualified for it because you're not meeting the needs that the company or the organization has out there. My experience just kind of watching people go through the SkillBridge process, and what I think the secret sauce in this situation is it comes down to guidance, it comes down to experience, and it comes down to the most precious commodity that any service member has, and that's their time. The time to gain experience, the time to work through the issues that they need to work through in order to find themselves, the experience in being exposed to those that are in the industry that can really open their eyes. And the quicker we can get people to realize where they want to go or where they don't want to go, the quicker they're going to be able to make those pivots for themselves and put themselves in a better position to win. And what I can tell you is the organization that I was affiliated with before, they did a really good job of just providing that guidance, that framework to help get people there. But a common misconception that exists within all SkillBridges is that it's going to be the end-all be-all if somebody is able to participate in one of those programs to take them to the promised land of fulfillment and employment. And the reality is it's not. It comes down to the individual and how much work you're willing to put into either that intern to hire type situation or that other training situation to put yourself in a position to win. And so I think in a lot of cases, there's been a lot of bad publicity around because folks are not necessarily getting the outcomes that they're looking for, thinking that they're owed or guaranteed a job just by participating. But if your participation wasn't 100% in, what are you really upset with? You should be upset with yourself. If you didn't do enough research and have the conversations with those employers to see if there was a full-time position available to you, that's kind of bad on you, and probably bad on the employer if they didn't showcase that overall. But they're really using this program to curate opportunities to help build experience, but it's not ever a guarantee. So when it comes down to leadership being involved in affecting these, the reality is most senior leaders have no clue what the program is. They know what they've heard around the smoke pit or around, just what they've heard from other friends. They've heard good things. They've heard bad things. They're not necessarily educated on it. And they don't necessarily understand the true value of allowing people to have that time and space to really figure things out. Because as we've got discussed on here, and I've spent the last 3 years of my life discussing, you don't know what you don't know. And it takes time to successfully transition unless you're going to be the selfish teammate that takes time to take care of these things in service. And I don't think that's anything that any of the branches of service necessarily want or need, because you need selfless individuals to continue to serve and do the work that's necessary. So in my opinion, Adam, let me toss out a solution right now. Tom McKenzie's opinion, just mine. I believe that programs like SkillBridge should be a retention or an extension tool. Meaning, if you do 4 years and you want to have a SkillBridge, would you be willing to do 24 more months on your first term to be guaranteed the opportunity to do a SkillBridge? That would kind of, allow a couple things to happen. One, the service is getting a little bit more service out of that individual. They're getting more touches and opportunities to retain them beyond that extension or that re-enlistment. Two, let's say you can't retain them. Well, at least they're getting their time back to have a more successful transition. And if they're able to have a more successful transition, in theory, if you do right by that service member, they're going to be thriving, or they're going to be in a better position and a little less bitter with what might have happened. Now you've got a recruiting advocate that's out there. So, we talk about all these services having changes to their force designs. The Marine Corps is one there. you want to win the war on retention, you've got to win the war on transition. And you have to want to invest in the people to give them the opportunity to find themselves and keep them advocates and keep them supporting your brand, vice just letting them go out the backside and you're pissed off that they're not there and they're pissed off that they didn't have the opportunity. So that would be my solution, right? Save some money, Doge. So Elon, if you're watching this, and I doubt it'll make it there, but if you're watching this, save yourself some money, offer some extensions, and have this be an incentive for people, after they decide to sign on. You're going to retain a lot more people in uniform than if you just cut them loose. And the reality is when you're tied to a SkillBridge program, you always have the opportunity to go back and re-enlist. And I watched this time and time again as service members were kind of navigating the transition for themselves. This idea of what they wanted to do really started to, come together and realize that the idea is not what they want, or they're not that well prepared, and that maybe going back into the oven of DoD was what they needed to do to be more successful. And sure enough, that's what they would do. I can tell you right now that there were dozens of service members that found themselves in that situation. They kind of tested the waters of what the corporate world was going to look like beyond their transition, and they went back and retooled themselves to hopefully have a better shot when the next round came through.
I think you have a pretty genius idea, and I think if you unpack it, it does a lot of things, not just keep retention numbers up and guarantee them a shot at a SkillBridge, but now that 24 months that they're investing back into whatever branch they're in, you've started subconsciously the thinking process of transition, right? Like you've planted that seed, whether you know it or not, because I know you're going to get pushback on it. People are going, well, why would I want a SkillBridge? Like nobody knows. Well, I can see a lot of value in the SkillBridge, just hindsight being 2020 since I've been out, and everything that I'm trying to build and do. Some of those tracks, UI, UX design, cybersecurity, all that stuff, like these are valuable skills that for me, I've had to learn in running my own business and starting a podcast and all of that. I've had to learn several different skills, but if I would have been afforded the opportunity to go through a SkillBridge, if my leadership, whether it existed at the time or not, would have had this kind of finger on the pulse of what a SkillBridge is, it at least would have given me the opportunity and the freedom to explore things that I was interested in, right? So instead of me getting out, going straight to college, finishing college and jumping straight into insurance sales, I could have gone through a SkillBridge program, found out what sales or Salesforce was all about the right way, got an education on it, not just recruited into insurance pipeline as another salesman that's super expendable because they already know 90% of you aren't going to make it or be able to cut it. So they're not even invest any money into training you how to sell. At least I could have explored that through a SkillBridge and immediately decided, oh, this is definitely not something I want to fucking do. So I'm going to move on to something else. I think that's the overarching, to me, there's nothing more valuable about SkillBridge than that, because I know you have to discover who you are and what fills your cup up. And so what better way to do that than with all these different certifications you can go and play with, and you're going to know pretty soon whether this is for you or not.
No, 100% dead on, Adam. And that's just in the time that I was there, watching people go through that process and narrow down their focus just because now they have the time and space to be a human being again. The inverse of that, right? Again, we talked about this, I think, the first episode. The fact that we expect service members in a 90 days of terminal leave or 60 days of terminal leave or 30 days or 2 weeks, that they're going to have their life figured out. That's the biggest leadership mistake out there, right? And the question I would pose to every senior leader, every NCO, staff NCO officer that exists out there is, would you want your son or daughter to be given the same treatment that you are affording? Would you invest more or the same or less in these individuals that you're kind of coaching and mentoring if it was your son or daughter in uniform? And look, the Marine Corps is a family, and there is not a brotherhood that I've experienced that's anywhere close to what you're going to get in that time frame. And I'm sure it's the same DoD wide. But that brotherhood, it really hurts when people are not as invested in your own individual success when you're no longer part of the club. And that's part of the problem, is that this has to become personal. Really, another possible solution is these services need to get very, very serious about investing in their people and making everyone part of the mission to drive retention, to drive recruiting. Not just the commanders. You need to jam that down to the lowest enlisted levels and make sure that everybody understands that we have to invest in our people to curate and make them the best that they can be, so that when they do return to hometown America, they're in a position to further promote the service or the organization. And it's not until, services hop on board and say that that's what they're going to do. And I've got a prediction right now. The first service that's going to probably do it is the Navy. And the main reason for that is because the admiral who oversees the Navy Recruiting Command has turned that thing on a dime. He is inventive, innovative. He comes up with different ways to motivate and inspire the force, and has gone out of his way to really surround himself with leaders that help give a different direction that they can go. But the reality is, the other services need to adopt that, because Matt and I just got done watching a video on all the senior officers that oversee the recruiting commands, talking about the state of recruiting and the challenges that they're facing. And quite literally, it's a little scary to hear the trends, and it's a little scary to think that folks don't understand just how apparent this transition gap is impacting things on recruiting. But I lived in that world forever, and I never even considered one time what happened when somebody transitioned out. Now on the outside, kind of going through this, working with service members, it is clear as day to me that if you want to fix recruiting, you want to fix retention, you got to get folks involved. You have to curate opportunities. The programs are already in existence. It's just a matter of embracing it and then figuring out how it can be leveraged in both the individual service members' best interests and also the best interests of those organizations. The one that cracks the nut there first is going to win the war on recruiting. They're not going to have the same problems, but it really comes down to one thing, and that's competing for talent. That's what the services are doing. They're competing for talent both against the other branches of service, the retention piece, and then they're fighting with corporate America. The only way to do it is in a collaborative way, in my opinion. And I think Matt could probably speak a bit to that about force design and why some of these senior leaders, might be a little less inclined to curate these types of opportunities.
Yeah, Matt, the floor is yours, brother.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the process of joining the military, right? Like, so when you go to boot camp, really what you're doing is you're choosing to conform to a group. You're giving up a degree of individuality in order to create the group identity. That really creates sort of the unit cohesion and the environment in which you can lead a military unit. You have to have people listening to orders. You have to have people conforming to a standard. That's part of the process, right, of becoming a uniformed person, regardless of the service. Transition is very selfish process. It's an individual, selfish process, and commanders are fixated on the value proposition and fairness. They want to make sure that they're not treating someone differently than someone else, or they're worried that what the service member is going to get out of SkillBridge maybe isn't what they would want the service member to get. And what I would say to those folks is, everybody's needs are going to be different at the end. And some people are, and I've talked to, me and Tom have probably talked to, Tom particularly, hundreds, if not thousands of folks. So I can tell you, not one answer I ever received from somebody has been the same. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's as simple as, I just need a couple of months away from the op tempo. I need a couple of months to just not be anxious, to have a weekend, to hang out with my kids. And that may be the primary modus for a SkillBridge. And we can't feel guilty about saying, I just want some space to kind of contemplate my situation. Other people are looking at it like, hey, I need this professional certification. I need to figure out the skill set with UI UX, like you mentioned, Adam. I need to kind of develop a certain skill, and everybody's going to be different. Every need's going to be different, because the fundamental thing that happens at the end of service is you go back to being an individual. You go back to being a family unit, and you have to worry about those individual needs that happen in that family unit, and you can't be concerned about the unit situation anymore. So I think that's one of the things that commanders fail to recognize, is that there's a de-assimilation that happens, and that's healthy for people, because if you go out of the service And we've all met these people who are basically have never hung it up, and they're just still trying to be a dude out there wearing a uniform, but they're not wearing it. It's a miserable experience talking to these people, and it's a miserable experience. I'm sure to be these people, dude. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And that's because we've never given them the space to say, who are you really? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I hope does it answer the bill on what you asked me, Tom? I had this in my mind as you were talking, and I think I went on a side tangent here. It was that answer the bill.
I mean, it wasn't necessarily what I was thinking, but we'll come back to it, Matt. But you make a good point, and so it's like, again, shameless plug time, right, Adam? One of the things that I've found myself, involved with is this goals training program that is, when I came across it, almost 3 years past my retirement, it's like, oh, this thing right here, this is the thing that I don't necessarily say cures all, but it cures a lot, because it really puts in perspective, what your goal is for your transition and what you can do to find your purpose, and the tests that you can run to really figure out if you're chasing passions. But the biggest thing that I took away from the session that we had today was that there are so many service members that their definition of success is, again, landing that six-figure paying job, getting into a career or hitting a certain title that exists. And it kind of goes back to the post I had earlier. It's the next resume virtue that you can, hang on your hat or wear on your chest. We're not necessarily talking about what's going to fulfill these people long term and what's going to keep them driven and motivated and really thriving at their best. This whole situation of transition has become so obsessed with career progression and job placement that we're losing the other side of the coin here, which is that much more important. And that is, the in-tune connection that somebody has to themselves as an individual. And Matt's right. There is programming that takes place when somebody enters service. It's absolutely necessary. It's absolutely necessary to be part of that unit. But there is nothing that puts the human being back together or makes them an individual again. There's no type of training that goes into that situation where they are really defining for themselves what goals they have, what they want to accomplish, where their values are. Everything that we had was issued to us. And so to not, take a look at the problem as a whole and to hyper focus on one aspect of that is just, we're not doing ourselves any favors, which is leading to this perpetual problem that is the equivalent to a snake eating its tail. It's never going to get any better because we keep trying to propose solutions that aren't addressing the problems. I would equate it to misdiagnosing a patient, right? Like, if you misdiagnose a patient who has the flu, but he may have the same symptoms as somebody who has cancer, and you give that person who has the flu chemo, you're probably going to kill them. It's the same thing. We are treating symptoms and not the disease. The disease in this case is that we are not doing enough to educate our service members across the board. We don't have viable programs that are in place to help them be in tune with themselves, to really figure out where their energy should go. Yet we're curating all these programs to treat symptoms of the bigger disease. And until the services decide that they're going to treat the disease instead of the symptoms, we are just kind of destined to go down a pathway that no one in this country should want to be part of. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. When you look at where we are total force strength wise, when you look at the plans that are in place right now for the force design that's going to take place, there is some blatant bad stuff that if folks really understood what was going on, they'd probably be jumping up and down. This is just a huge part of that problem that could be solved with engaged leaders that want to be innovative, that want to, collaborate with those that have been on the other side of the coin. Problem is, most of them are just risk adverse at this point to take the first steps to really seek the answers that exist and curate solutions that make sense for all.
Well, I think there's something to that. How do you curate solutions when you've never walked a mile in those shoes either, right? So that's a big part of the problem. And I think until now, right, like there's those of us out here making a lot of noise about this, really hammering home the problem and trying to make change. until they start bringing people like us in to help them implement change, like nothing is going to change, because these leaders are going to stay in these positions thinking they know what's best for the veteran that's transitioning, when you don't have a fucking clue because you've never done it. Like, you've never ever done it, and nobody's actually sat with you, even as a senior leader in, we'll just use the Army, you're a sergeant major, you're controlling all of this stuff. When's the last time somebody walked up to you and said, who is sergeant major so and so without the uniform, and you had an answer for them? You probably never been asked that question, first of all. And second of all, if you do, you're going to give me some surface level answer that says, well, I'm a dad and I'm a husband and I'm a sergeant major. And it's like, without the uniform, fuckhead, like who are you? And have you spent any time to figure this out? And so, again, we've got to get our foots in the door, right? Our feet, excuse me, foots isn't a word, but we got to get our feet in the door into these transition programs. And like, I've just resigned myself to the fact I'm going to continue and make noise about this until the people who have the rank and the power to make this change knock on my door. And then I'm just going to unload on them with everything that I know about the transition. Because guess what? I spent 8.5 years in it before I figured it out, right? And I set out to do this right here so that everybody that comes after me doesn't have to make the same mistakes I have. And boy, have I discovered so many damn mistakes and where we go wrong. It's almost like now it's time for all of us to come together and make the leadership aware of this, so that, because I can't solve this problem by myself. You can't solve it by yourself. Matt can't solve it by himself.
Hold on, Adam. I'm pretty sure I can solve it by. I'm just kidding.
That's a typical Marine attitude for you, and I love it. But you know what? It even goes further into that. Guys that have walked that path, who understand what I'm talking about, and I tell them what my plans are. I'm going to make change at the DoD level, and they're just like, "You better give up on that dream because it's never going to happen." Well, my humble opinion on that is, you're the reason, and that mindset is the reason we're still in this situation, because somebody told you no and you gave up. Well, when was the last time in the military somebody told you no and you gave up? Well, you can't take that, bunker, or you can't get, that guy, whatever. Like, this is the problem. Like, there needs to be more people willing to just ride this fucking wave and put in this grind to call attention to these things and get the people who have the power to make the change to listen.
I mean, you're dead on there, Adam. And I think the biggest takeaway for me, it's the collaboration, right? Not a single organization, not, whether they're a huge organization that is, very well funded and has a robust program. There's no one that's cracked the nut on this. And it takes absolutely every program. It takes absolutely every advocate. It takes absolutely every single person working for the true stakeholder in this transition. And in this case, in transition, there are two stakeholders. There is the individual service member, who should be at the forefront of that decision-making process. And then there are the organizations or branches that they come out of. Those are the stakeholders in transition, not the companies, not the organizations that run these programs. They are the people and the services, period, the end. That's it. And so there are some folks that are in this transition space that put themselves, and they want to dictate the policies that affect those people and the services, and they've never donned the uniform themselves. That's wrong. Yeah. It takes everyone. It takes everybody bringing their ideas to the table, putting this in front of decision makers, letting them understand the full picture instead of hyper-focusing on one area. And I think that is where we are just failing so bad, is that those that have the loudest voice right now have no clue what they're doing to the 230,000 service members that don't get the opportunity for a skill bridge. And that's what it really comes down to. Like, it was so cool to work at an organization and watch that happen as folks transition through a skill bridge program. But for me, what about the 230,000 others that don't get that opportunity? And those are the people that we should be focused on serving. Those are the folks that we should be trying to take care of. Those are the ones that we should be going out of our way to make sure that they've got softer landings when they finally do hit hometown America. And it is going to take everybody being involved in the situation and being able to give their opinion, their take, so that a tangible solution can actually come to the forefront.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because I know I don't have all the answers. I know you don't have all the answers. Matt might have all the answers. But anyway, your thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, I think it's a hard problem to solve because it's an individual issue. Like you can't like what's great about the military, what's awesome about the military is you can move mountains by decree. You can make a policy, you can give an order, and things will just happen. Right? Like that's a really empowering feeling. And I got to imagine if you're a general, like the mountains you can move with just saying some words, it's pretty freaking amazing. But you can't do that to influence a transition. It just doesn't work because you can't say, well, Lance Corporal, you should have these problems. And I don't know why you have other problems. No, everybody is just a unique individual. So it takes servant leadership. It takes someone to go down there and provide the introspective counseling and leadership that the lowest level individual needs to find success after the service. And that's hard to do, man, because you're training. Our leadership is trained to kind of, hey, we have rules and regulations. You're going to fall in line. And then at the end of someone's time, reverting back to, hey, brother, let's sit down and talk about your situation and where you need to be and how I can help you get to your successful self post-service. Some people are going to do it naturally. Some people are just gangsters and they're going to figure it out. And no matter what the conditions are, then there's the 80% who are going to learn through pain. I'm one of those who has learned through misery and pain. Right. And then there's like the last 10, 20% who without guidance and help are going to fall off the face of the earth. They're going to fall on their face and they're going to suffer. And so everybody's built different. And I think there's a tendency to be almighty and powerful based on rank. It really has to, you have to bring that down eyeball to eyeball, kneecap to kneecap, and have those like, what's your situation, brother? How are your parents doing? How's your family? Where do you want to move? It's not a great tax state for veterans. What school are you going to go to? How are you going to be able to afford that with the GI Bill? Have you done have you applied? Have you done your pre-classes? Have you, this stuff that no one really talks about in the service, but it's so important when you learn it, you go through it. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. I wish I had known. I wish I had someone look out for me. And I think that's really the problem. And that's why I'm like, unless culturally the institutions actually embrace that process and take responsibility for it, I don't know if it's solvable from within the DoD. I think it's probably where you have to have some sort of overlap with other institutions who take care of veterans and make them implement into that space. I agree with Tom on everything he says, but the solution is such a complex problem that who knows, but ignoring it's not going to fix it. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, and we've got this comment here. Adam Marquis says, I'm currently transitioning out of the United States Marine Corps. The shift on skill bridge for senior enlisted leaders is all but dead. The large sentiment is you've had X number of years to be ready for your next career. He asks how we feel about it. Well, first of all, I think that's the absolute attitude that is making transition worse for everybody because, I don't know, I had 13 years in the Army to figure out my next career. When did I have time to do that? I was overseas every other fucking year. Like you didn't give me time to prepare for shit. And then you ended my career before it was supposed to end. So that's how I feel about it. I think that this senior enlisted leader, whoever you're speaking to, Adam, that's a detrimental attitude to have. And I think that's, fundamentally the underlying problem is this is how these leaders are doing this, right? You've had X number of years to think about this. Maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe we as members of the military should come in with the knowledge that we're going to get out, right? But we come in as children, man. I was 17 years old. I didn't even know how to be an adult. At 30 years old when I got out, I still wasn't an adult. So how can you expect me to be career planning when 11 months after I get off one deployment, I'm back on another deployment overseas? You know what I'm saying? That's my take. I'd love to hear you guys' take in response to Adam's comment.
Matt, you want to go first? Because I'm going to get angry. So this is going to be time to calm down.
Look, I think that's a perspective. And this is to Adam Marquis, who made the question here, is I think that this is a perspective of a leader who views human resources in an unlimited function. There's a economic term called tragedy of the commons. When you treat something like it's a never-ending, undepletable resource, you treat it poorly. That's a human nature. We've deforested parts of our country today because we looked at trees like they'll grow back. Screw it. Let's cut the redwoods down. Let's build houses. And we eventually found out that this is a limited resource that we have to be careful and we have to manicure it and we have to be stewards over it. And I would argue that human beings that want to serve in the uniform are just like that. We treat them like, hey, some recruiter will find a replacement for you, buddy. I don't really care about you. Go back to hometown America, do your thing, and somebody will bring me a new body. Well, those bodies, and we've seen this, are not coming anymore. We're having trouble getting them, and we can put any kind of spin we want. We can say, oh, we're restructuring the force, or we're realigning to potential threats. Well, every single service is cutting their end strength. So if you're telling me realignment is reducing end strength for fights that might be a bit bigger than Iraq and Afghanistan, then you're blowing smoke up your own butt. And whoever the leadership is that's supposed to be responsible for the senior dude probably needs to have a discussion about what the strategy really is. And I don't mean to kind of bag on him, Adam. Me and Tom have admitted that we are both part of the problem. When you're a senior leader in the Marine place like the Marine Corps, you're expected to be a company man and toe the company line. And, that's just the nature of the beast. But it lacks, and Adam Markey, your situation is probably unique to you. It's you got things going on in your life that you're not going to tell this dude, and you're just going to swallow it, and you're going to have to deal with it when it comes up and figure it out like a lot of us do. And that will make it hard for you to recommend to your kids, hey, why don't you follow dad's life path and join the service? And that when that recruiter shows up to your house when your kid's of age, 18 years old, and says, hey, dude, I'm talking to your kid about service. Do you mind if I have that conversation? And then you say, go pound sand, recruiter. My kid isn't joining this thing because I went through it and it was a bad process. It was a bad experience. That's when that payback happens. And the leader of today is not caring about that interaction tomorrow. And that's really kind of like this whole thing coming back on itself. And so I hope I didn't go too crazy into the left. So Tom, go ahead, man. Let me.
All right. So I'm less angry now, Matt. That's the key takeaway here. I'm less angry.
Right.
So,
there it is.
Adam, how do I feel about it? I think it's absolutely terrible, but this is the status quo that we've just come to accept as senior leaders, right? That are blind to the true situation. You want a solution? Here's a solution. Have them watch this, right? Hopefully that senior leader is inspired enough to maybe reconsider where they are. And if you want to shoot me a DM with that senior leader's name, I'd be happy to have a conversation with him and tell him about every mistake that I've made on my way out the door. Moreover, I think this is what it comes down to, Adam, is that if you are being stymied and you don't have the opportunity to participate in a program like SkillBridge, there are tons and tons of resources that are out there that can help you out while you're in service. You just need to have your eyes open to them. So Matt and I both work for a company known as Endure by Faith. We're in the process of setting up something that's going to be groundbreaking and probably out there in the next 30 days. So if we're not connected, let's get connected because I want to be able to share that resource. But very quick ones that I'll tell you to go to. Number one, if you have not heard of the organization American Corporate Partners, that is one that you need to become deeply familiar with. What they are in essence is they are a nonprofit organization that match makes you to a mentor that works in corporate America, either at the organization that you want to work at or in the industry that you want to work at based on your interests and what you're trying to get into. And they will provide free one-on-one mentorship sessions with you over the course of 12 months. And I can just tell you that everybody I worked with, I highly touted that program overall. And that's something that I just recommend that you do. The second thing is you've got to kind of develop a clear pathway for what you want for yourself. And that's going to involve you seeking out other mentors that are probably outside those lines. So find somebody who does the thing that you want to do or the thing that you think you want to do. Find people that are doing, that are having success post their military career and seek them out for a conversation because, Adam, even though he's like a super life personality, looks like a superhero these days. He's just a normal dude. Matt's just a normal dude. I'm just a normal dude. And I'll tell you right now, there's nothing else out there that I love more than having the opportunity to have conversations and try and help give advice or just be a sounding board, for you. So I would just say, yeah, it sucks. Have your leadership watch this. And if you need anything, feel free to reach out to myself, to Matt, and just be on the lookout for the Endure by Faith resource that's going to be coming your way within hopefully the next 30 days or so, because that is going to be an absolute game changer for most service members.
Yeah, I would say Tom is a nexus for resources, and I can definitely direct you in the right way too. But I think Tom's really collated a really broad network of people who have different tools and resources for people, and he's a great resource. And I would direct you, just like he said, reach out if you need something. Transition begins at the first day of enlistment, Travis Lane says. So I'm going to give you guys an analogy. Transitions like autism, it's a spectrum, right? So you're going to have people like Travis. I think that from the day one, they're looking at 4 years down the road, and they're like playing chess with their time in the military. And then you have people who are playing checkers, and then you have people who are playing Connect Four, and then you have people who are playing hopscotch, right? You have like different players and layers of the game. And I would say that, while I agree with you, you're probably, Travis, in that top 10% of individuals with that statement, like, hey, I've taken ownership from day one. I'm the man. I would say that most people fall in the I learned through pain world, and then there's that group that we really care about that end up on the streets or something like that, that really need kind of a lot of assistance, and we should meet the needs of our veteran population. Is what I think the argument is that meet them where they need to be met, and that's not always going to be the same. It's on a spectrum. So we came up with an analogy, Adam, while you were gone. I said that transitions like autism, it's on the spectrum, brother, and everybody's got different needs. So I'm trying to.
Dude, that's so true. I was asked the other day, like somebody in my comments on one of my posts, he said something about like, how do you view how long the transition takes? It's forever. It's forever. It gets easier. You know what I mean? But like, truly, I think the military has such a huge impact, at least for me, and I'm speaking for myself. I can't speak for anybody else, but as much as I love the Army and what the Army has done for me, got me out of small town Indiana, kind of really helped me understand that there's so much more to this world, and that I'm capable of, tapping into all of that. Like, I'm super grateful for the Army. And so, it's always going to be a part of me, and I'm always going to have this like default kind of go back to some of those mindsets and some of those, behaviors that I had in the military, even no matter how far or how much work I do in my transition. And so I think transition is honestly, it's an ongoing thing forever. You're always going to be learning something new, and you should always be comparing that to kind of, your past or other chapters of your book, if you will. So I think you're right. It absolutely is on a spectrum, right? We talked offline. My sister and my brother-in-law were in the Air Force. They were officers. They have a real estate empire. They'll never be on my show, more than likely, because as far as I can tell, they've never talked about any kind of struggle in transition whatsoever. We also talked about the Air Force, by and large, minus Coast Guard people. I think they're still like ghosts or aliens or whatever, because I know 2 Coast Guard people, but the Air Force by far and away are the ones that reach out to me the least, the ones that have, just from my experience, I'm not blanketing Air Force, but have the least problems in transition. And so it is on the spectrum. And I think that's a great analogy, man.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, so I just got to say this because I had an analogy, pop in my head here, Adam. So, I say this because I kind of feel like getting married and joining the service are really kind of one and the same, meaning that when you join, you are this clean sheet of white paper that exists, and that service or your spouse is another clean sheet of white paper, and it's the equivalent to gluing the two together. And then let's say it ends, right? Whether it's transition or it's a divorce, no matter how hard you try, you're never going to be able to take that piece of paper and peel it apart and have it be clean in the same way that it was before you attached yourself to that organization or to that person. The reality just comes down to this. You should remember, I guess, the good things that come from your service, and hopefully that's what's attached for you. And hopefully you've got enough of yourself intact that once you do get through the transition, you can look back at your time for what I see it now. That time in service was the most honorable, fun, kick-ass time that I ever had my entire life. I met some of the greatest people there, learned some of the hardest lessons that needed to be taught, went through a ton of struggles and had huge amounts of growth. And I think for me in transition, that was the part that was scary, is how do I recreate the same type of experience for the remainder of my life? And how do I live with the same type of purpose that I have, that I've had overall? And it really just comes down to having the right type of time to figure things out, the right type of experiences, the right type of network or tribe that is around you, and being able to share that experience with others, because that has been the missing component. And again, say this all the time, veterans are not victims. We don't ever want to have this victim mentality or this entitled mentality. So we've got to kind of band together and start showcasing for each other what we've gone through, what we've learned, the same way we would do it in combat, so that we don't repeat the same mistakes of the past. And I think that's really, for me, on today's show here, that's what this is. This is a stance where we're planting a flag saying enough is enough. The status quo is no longer acceptable. We're not going to allow folks to continue to run through the same perpetual cycle that just ruins people. Nor are we going to allow any of our brothers or sisters that have gone through service to continue to get ruined by processes that are in place, or leadership that's in place that can't think beyond what the SOP tells them to do. And so it's not until everybody bands together, and it's not until voices like this get heard, that change, really can take effect to where we can get the long-term outcomes that we're looking for. And that's all this is. We want to take care of the people that have taken care of us and have allowed us to live in a free way, and to take care of those organizations that have also taken care of us.
I'm ready to run through a brick fucking wall. We're taking a stand. I want to wrap this up as we're coming up to the hour, and I want to do so from me personally. I challenge all senior leadership in the military. If you see this and any of this strikes a nerve, pisses you off, I hope it does, reach out to me. I am more than willing to have a conversation with you, because I'm not going to stop until we make change. And I can't speak for the other two, but I think they would do the same thing. So I challenge all senior leadership. If you're listening to this, you're active duty right now, and you want to know more, I am more than happy to clear my calendar and spend as much time as you need to beat this point home to you. Also, Thomas, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about goals. Also, I want everybody that's listening to this to know Thomas and I will work out some deal, but I want to let goals live in my community, the Stronghold. It's a free community for veterans. I want more veterans to come to the community to talk about their transitions, to leverage people like me and Thomas, who's in the community, and 70 other veterans who are in there now, to come and talk about your problems. Just put them out there into the world and see that we are willing to help you through all of our experiences. So talk about the goals stuff. If you have a retort to what I said about challenging senior leadership, and please address that as well, both of you.
Yeah, I would just say this. Again, I'm going back to that senior leader that's not allowing that to happen for that individual. When your time comes, and it will, I really hope that you have got things figured out for yourself, because I almost guarantee you that when your time comes, and you get that answer of, you've had X amount of years to prepare for your next career, you're gonna wish that you didn't give that answer, because I know that I did, and you don't want to be a hypocrite. So don't be like Tom in that regard. Don't be a hypocrite. But for everybody that might be listening, I'll just tell you this much. It took me about 2.5, 3 years to find a program that I truly believe at scale is going to have the type of impact to open people's eyes, to find their purpose beyond their time in uniform, and to really get to, getting into a life where you can be the individual and live up to your true potential. None of us that have joined our branch of service to be average human beings. None of us joined to just be mediocre. We joined to be the best of what we could be, to give every single day, and to live a fulfilled and thriving life. And that's what every single service member, I think, really deserves after they've decided to lay it on the line. So the goals training that I'm involved with right now, working with a partner of mine who's been at this for about 30 years. Again, originally designed to help business people just live more fulfilled lives, and going through that experience for myself has been absolutely transformational, because it has made it simple for me to kind of redefine my purpose, make sure that I am putting my energy towards things that are going to bring me fulfillment, and has let me live just a more peaceful and balanced life, which is something that I have really, struggled and had a desire for from the day that I got out of service. So the program is not free, but we do have some generous donors out there that have set aside some scholarship money, and so we'd love to have anybody take place with any of our future cohorts to be involved with that. Secondary to that, again, Matt and I work for Endure by Faith, an organization that is just centered on helping service members find their way, and really, more in the employment realm, but also resources that are out there that can help you regardless of where you're at in the chain. So you're active duty, you're a skill bridger, you're somebody who's actually in the veteran community. We want to be able to help you out the best that we can. And again, I'd say about the next month or so, we're about to unleash a resource that's going to be available for all service members out there, regardless of where they are, that is going to truly make a difference and give you the tools that you need to navigate wherever you are in life. So with that being said, I really appreciate your time today, Adam, and I'll shut my mouth and turn it over to Matt.
Yeah, I think I'll just say this. I think I have young kids. I am not cynical about the future of America. I want this world that we live in to grow and be prosperous for our kids and our kids' kids. In order for us to do that, it's my belief we have to have a thriving and empowered veteran community to keep us out of wars, to keep us equipped for war if we have to go, to keep us in the right position across the globe. And that means I need to be an advocate for everybody who is coming from the same cloth as me, coming from the same background as me, and helping you, maybe give you a lift up. So like Tom said, I'm not cynical about it. I think I would love to see a world where we have some of the greatest companies in the world run by veterans, some of the highest levels of leadership in our politics be veterans. I'm super stoked about Vance just because he's a Marine veteran. A lot of folks out there that I think is super important. So if we can help in any way to empower you or to help you or to lift you up, reach out, man. I mean, Adam, Tom, and myself, more than happy to give you advice or point you in the right direction. Sure.
Gentlemen, I'm the one who's honored. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for agreeing to do this and to help give me more of a voice. It means the world to me. I love that we get to come together and share our ideologies and philosophies on this stuff and really make an impact, because we are making an impact, whether you guys know it or not. So thank you guys so much. For those of you who are listening, I plan on bringing you a lot more lives. The next one will be on February 27th at 12 o'clock. We'll be going over IVMF stuff since Thomas mentioned ACP. I've had an ACP mentor for almost a year now. Best decision I ever made. It has unlocked so much for me. It has unlocked so many different resources and networks. So we're not just saying these resources to just say resources that exist. Like if I give you a resource, it's one that I've probably personally used myself, and I 100% recommend it. It's the same reason I'm doing the live with the program manager for IVMF, because they've got a new program that's dropping that I think is super relevant. Plus, I'm also going through the IVMF EBV program right now, which is another phenomenal program. So I feel like it's my job to call attention to resources that are phenomenal, that are way less talked about, that people don't know about. So we'll be doing that live. Coming here in the very near future, we're going to be talking about some of the issues with UCMJ and MST stuff. We're also going to be bringing on a whistleblower from TRICARE, a provider who is going to really shed some light on what's going on with insurance companies and what they're doing to family members and providers behind your back that you don't even know about. So join me for all of those things. I'm going to keep bringing you my unfettered opinion on all of these things. I'm going to keep bringing the truth. I'm going to keep having the conversations, and I'm going to keep bringing people like Thomas and Matt to help me do that, because it's important that everybody understands that the only way we fix this problem is to come together instead of compete. So that being said, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for doing this with me. Take care. And if you want to do this again, you know where to find me.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Adam.
See you guys.